I had to put this over here today because I almost threw myself on fire last week. As we're singing these songs this morning, Joy to the World, I was remembering back when Jamie and I were missionaries in Romania, that we didn't know all the words, so you have to listen to the songs really closely and try to pick out the words. And one day, one of us was in the nursery, and the other one was in service, and afterwards we were talking about the songs we were singing. We're like, did you catch any of the songs today? I'm like, yeah. And there's two words that are really close in Romanian. Joy, which is bucurie, and kitchen, which is bucătărie. Well, we hadn't learned joy yet, but we knew kitchen. It was like, I thought it was really weird that we were singing about entering into God's kitchen today. And she's like, I think the same thing. It's like, I don't understand. I mean, maybe it's a cultural thing. We later learned that no, it's joy. It's joy. Well, today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing the same thing we've been doing for the last several weeks, where every single week we've been focusing just on one aspect of the Christmas story. It's so easy, it's easy for us to read through the Christmas story, the Nativity story, and just to go, oh yeah, Jesus was born, she was a virgin. We see all these things and we just kind of float through it. So every single week we've been slowing down and focusing in on one thing. And this week we're going to be focusing in specifically just on one word. So I'm going to reread two verses from what he just read. In Matthew 1, 22 and 23. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son. This is verse 23. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. They will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. And that's what we're going to be focusing in on today, is just that word Emmanuel. And what's the significance of that word? Why was it significant then? Why is it significant for us today? So what we're going to be doing is the same thing we do pretty much every week. So we're going to go back to the Old Testament, and we're going to look at the story of the Bible. Because this is just one big story, and every single part of it plays a part in this story. So we're going to go back to the beginning, so we can say, why is this word Emmanuel, why is the concept of God with us significant? So for today, we're going to go back all the way to the very beginning. In Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So what we start with is a creator God, a God who begins to create. And what's so beautiful about this, what's so significant is God says, let there be light, and there's light. Let there be trees, and there are trees. Let there be stars, and there's stars. Let there be the moon, the sun. And he begins to create all of these good things. And then he creates humans. He creates the first man. He creates the first woman. And these two people play a very special role because they're the first two human beings. And then God takes them and he makes a garden for them. He makes a special place for them. And it tells us where this garden is. It's where four rivers come together. The Tigris, the Euphrates, and two other rivers. And I'm putting up a map for a second of where this is located. We see that there's... These are the two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, and this is where they're located in the world. They start in Turkey, and they go down into modern-day Iraq. Two of the rivers no longer exist. We don't know where they are because they're covered by sand now. But this is the general area of where the Garden of Eden was located. And I show you this because so often it's easy for us to read the Bible or hear the stories and forget about the fact that this actually happened on this earth with real people, in a real place, and we know where it was. We don't know the exact location, but we know the general idea of it was somewhere in that area. So here are these two special people, Adam and Eve, and they're in a special place, the Garden of Eden. What we begin to see as the story goes on is it says God would come down in the evening, in the cool of the day, and he would walk around with Adam and Eve. He would spend time with them. He would be with them. He would be here, they would be next to him, and they'd walk around. They'd be able to ask him questions. They'd be able to talk to him. Why is the sky blue? Why did you make the elephant's trunk so long? What is Who knows? Just imagine the type of things that they would have been able to ask God himself, the Creator. But the significant thing about this is they were with him. They enjoyed him. They spent time together. And what we see in this is what God's desire was. He made a special place for them with every type of food, every type of animal, every type of tree, every type of vegetation. And it was the most beautiful place on earth. And he wanted them to be there, but he wanted to be with them. He wanted to be with them. He wanted them to know him. He wanted them to enjoy him. He wanted to be in a relationship with him. And this is how the story starts, is we see who God is. We see his heart. We see his desires. This is what he wants. God wants to be with mankind in a relationship so that they can know him. But something happens in the garden. Adam and Eve choose to disobey. They choose to sin. And in that moment, what happens when they disobey God is they used to be able to be with God. Now there's separation. Because sin came in, disobedience came in, there's now separation. And the significance of this is God is perfect, God is holy, God is righteous, and God is just. And the implications of this is God is completely free from sin. He has no sin in him at all. He has no imperfection. He has nothing wrong with him. He doesn't make mistakes. And what happens from this point on is the story of the Bible becomes this. How can a perfect, holy, righteous God be with sinners? How can a God who's perfect and holy and righteous and have no sin be with, spend time with, be in a relationship with people who sin all the time? And that becomes the story of the Bible from this point on. As we see this, as we begin to fast forward, is God dealing with people who disobey him, people who spit in his face, people who do all of these things to dishonor God. And the story of how his heart is still to be with people. So as we fast forward through the Bible, now we're going to fast forward all the way up to Genesis chapter 12. And in Genesis chapter 12, God appears to Abraham. He tells Abraham that he's called him. He's going to make him a special nation. He's going to make his descendants a special nation. And the beautiful thing about this is God begins to explain it to him. Is he says basically, I want to be with your descendants. I'm going to make them a special people. I'm going to take them out from the world so that they'll be separate. And I'm going to take them to a special place. And it's that same sort of concept we see with Adam and Eve, with the special people and a special place. And God's saying, I want to take your descendants and I want to take them to the promised land. This land that will be set apart, that will be different. And I want to bless them. I want this to be a holy nation. I want you to be a holy people. And I will bring this about. And as we go forward and we see what happens in the story, God tells him right from the get-go that your descendants will spend 400 years in a foreign country as slaves. But I'm going to rescue them and they're going to come out. So as they're coming out of slavery from Egypt and they're heading towards Israel. And on the way to Israel, God begins to give them laws and commandments, and he begins to do all these things. And for those of you who are here often, you know that we spend a lot of time from the time that Israel comes away as slaves to the time that they're in the promised land. So, excuse me. One of the things that God does during this time is he tells them to build something called the tabernacle. And for all of you who grew up in the church, most likely you remember the felt boards with the pictures of the tabernacle. And you're like, yeah, that was neat. I don't have any clue what that meant, but cool. But as you begin to understand the significance of the tabernacle, it makes the whole story of Jesus so much more exciting. Because what the tabernacle was, simply put, it was a tent. But the reality of what it was it was a traveling temple. God was giving them a way that even though they're traveling through the desert, that they can have a temple. they can have a place where God will meet with them. And as you begin to understand the significance of the tabernacle, what it was basically, it was a big tent like that, and it had two main rooms. It had a big room, and then it had a curtain, and it had a little room. And in the big room, there was an altar. Behind the altar, there was a curtain. Behind the curtain was the Ark of the Covenant, which was this golden box that had these two massive angels that were carved into the side of it that went over it. And it was a majestic looking box. And one of the significant things about this tabernacle is there's only certain people who are allowed to go in it, the priests. And even then, behind the curtain, there's only even special priests that were allowed to go back certain times. So, even though you have Israel, who are a special people, a called out people, they have this tabernacle that they built with these two rooms in it. And even then, not all Israelites, not all Jews are allowed to go in, only the priests. Well, what takes place in the tabernacle is very significant because it has so many implications. It's basically a picture of what we see with Jesus, where the priests would come in to the altar and they would make sacrifices. And on the altar there would be sacrifices for sin, to symbolize the fact that sin brings about death. And then behind this, the curtain, it separated this room from the other room, which was called the Holy of Holies. And it was holy because God said that He would come down to the top of the Ark of the Covenant, and there He would meet with them. He would meet with them. And we see this coming out again, that God's desire is still to meet with people, to be with people, to be in relationship with people. But in this time period, there's still separation. Where is this taking place in all the nations? No. It's only taking place in Israel. And can all the people go into the tabernacle? No. It's just the priests. And can all the priests even go into the Holy of Holies? No. So we see this picture of the fact that God still wants to meet with His people. He still wants to meet with mankind, but there's separation still. And when they built the temple, it was just a more solid version of this exact same thing. The big room and the little room. So this is the point, as we fast forward in history, that an angel would have appeared to Mary and Joseph. And this angel is telling them, you will have a son, and he will be Emmanuel, God with us. So imagine being like that, and after everything we've just talked about, hearing someone, an angel, promise that you're going to have a son and it's going to mean God with us. This child will be God with us. Because the mindset you would have after you think about this is you understand that there's always separation between God and man. Ever since the beginning. And even now, that Israel is a chosen people, a special people, a called out people, God is still, His presence is seen as in the temple. Can common people go just into the temple, to the Holy of Holies, and meet with God? No. There's still separation there. And that's what begins to be so exciting about this, is God is coming down to earth to take care of this separation. Because that ultimately is the struggle of the world, basically. If you think about all the religions in the world, what do they teach? God is at the top of the mountain. By your good works, by being a good person, you can get to God. But the promise of Emmanuel is God with us. God coming down. And as we begin to understand more and more of the passages just about explaining this truth, we see in John 1 that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The fact that as it goes into, everything came into being through Him. Where it talks about Jesus, and it talks about the fact that Jesus is God, and everything came into being through God. And this is something that's not really taught very often in Christian circles, but how often in the New Testament that it ascribes the fact that creation was through Jesus. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. All things came into being through him. Without him, there would be nothing, that is. That all things came into being through Jesus. All things came into being through the Word, and the Word became flesh. So here's the Creator, God, taking on flesh. God with us. And why did he do this? So we can know him, so we can be in a relationship with him, and to communicate to us that this was always his desire from the beginning. His desire was never just special people in a special place. But because of separation, because of sin, throughout the Old Testament, he had to do what he had to do to begin to explain to people that when you sin, when you disobey God, there is separation. But he was showing that he wanted to make a way to get rid of that separation. And ultimately, when Jesus came down, he began to show how he was the one who would do away with this separation, so that God could once again be with man in relationship. And how did Jesus do this? Was he born into the temple? Was he born into a palace? No. Was he born into an extremely significant family with prominence? No. Why did he do what he did? Where was he born? He was born in a stable. He was born in a manger. He was born in a barn, in a feed trough. Extraordinary? No. Ordinary. Were his parents super rich? No. The opposite. Was he born in the capital city? No. In a small town, really insignificant town. His parents from an insignificant town. So here we see God becoming man. And he was born in the most ordinary way possible. What's amazing about this is he's showing that it's not just about the special people. It's not just about the extraordinary people. It's not just about these people. But God's heart in all of this is that God would be with man and that he would be with the normal people. And that's what we see throughout all of Jesus' life, is the fact that who did he minister to? Prostitutes, tax collectors, people in small towns, all the religious elite, the pastors and the missionaries and those type of figures, they were all so much more focused on how can they be a good person and get to God. When what was taking place amongst them was the fact that God was with them. God came down to them. And ultimately, as we fast forward to the end of Jesus' life, and this is one of the most significant things that happens in Jesus' life at the very end on the cross, that many people don't even talk about very often. It's the fact that when Jesus dies on the cross, in his last moments, he says, "It is finished," and then what happens? There's this massive curtain in the temple, and it rips in two. And the beauty of that is it symbolizes the fact that what had existed before, separation between God and man, no longer exists. Because Jesus came down, he lived a sinless life, he lived a perfect life, and he was crucified as a payment for sin. So no longer was there a need for an altar with sacrifices. No longer was there a need for a curtain, because we had Jesus. We had the cross. So what does this mean for us as we go out this week and celebrate Christmas? So often for us, it's easy to just think about the fact that, Christmas is about good food, it's about friends, it's about family, it's a time to slow down. And we always tell ourselves that, oh, next year, I would love to spend more time. Well, this Christmas, today and tomorrow, let's be thinking about this. Let's be thinking about the fact that Emmanuel, which means God with us, demonstrates the fact that God isn't just concerned about the super spiritual people, the pastors, the missionaries, those who, quote, give their lives to service. He's concerned about you, and he wants to be with you. He wants to be in a relationship with you. He wants to talk to you. Jesus spent his first 30 years of his life living in obscurity, doing a normal job. And if he wouldn't have started his ministry, no one would have ever even known about him today, in terms of that. And so often for us, it's easy to think that we live obscure lives, not important lives, and that really God only works with the special people, not us. I'm just normal. What's significant about my life? But that was the majority of Jesus' life. Why? Because he wanted to communicate that this is important. Life is important. And he wants to spend his life with you. And he wants you to spend your life with him every day in relationship. And he made that possible through his life and death on the cross and resurrection. So as you leave today, have that picture of Jesus living a normal life for 30 years, being born to normal circumstances, so that you can remember that he cares about you where you are. And he came to this earth so that you could live your life where you are right now in relationship with him. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this verse, Emmanuel, God with us. Because it gives us a clear picture of the fact that you desire to be with us. You don't just desire to be with special people in special places, but you desire all mankind to come to know you and be in relationship with you. I just ask that today you would be working on our hearts and speaking to us, encouraging us, and just blessing us with this constant reminder of who you are and how much you care about us, and how much you love us, and how much you desire us to be with you. I just pray that today we would feel your presence as we sing this last song, Emmanuel. We ask all these things in the name of Jesus.